Poe cuts to this notion of what is actually worth being afraid of. You know what I mean?
It's not called Conversations with a Mummy, which I told you it was called. But it's better. It's called Some Words with a Mummy.
Each character faces something that is like the real worst fear they have.
It's so much better than Conversations with a Mummy because Some Words is like, dude, let's step outside.
So Hop Frog. The thing about Hop Frog.
But I don't know if I'll keep that as a title. And I don't know what kind of adaptation I'll do.
There are a handful of versions. Julie Taymor has a short film about it. It's a David Bowie, Noah Lou Reed song in which David Bowie does some vocals. There are a few etchings from the 19th century. And of course Tony Kushner and Mac Wellman have both written adaptations of this short story before, so I am plagiarizing from the two of them as I usually do. Once I was writing a play and everyone I told about it was like, oh, Tony Kushner already wrote that play. Which in fact he had not, he simply had included in his bio that he meant to write that play for 20 years.
You know what I'm sick of? Tony Kushner's fucking headshot. If I have to see that turtleneck over his chin one more time, it's horrifying. It's been out there for like 28 years now.
It's the last of Poe's stories. It's the last thing I think he ever wrote to be published.
This is how I approached this whole project. I googled Poe, went onto some weird fan site that had little synopses of all the short stories. I read through the synopses of all the short stories because they were only 4 sentences each. I was like, oh look, that one has a mummy that's like piped back to life with electricity. That's pretty cool.
I would say Hop Frog's ending is pretty happy.
Like faux science. I like the idea that people think they can do anything.
I once wanted to throw a Halloween party called Real Fear where no one would come in costume. But the rooms would be actually terrifying. Like at the door, you would get a biopsy report that was completely terrible for you. In some room, there would be some terribly lonely person. Real Fear Halloween. It would be great to have one room where it's just an oven you left on. An unlocked door.
Or if everybody had a fear and you had to figure out what people's fears were by talking to them at the party. Like I have 5 minutes to figure out what your deepest, darkest, fucking fear is, and if I win you punch my card. We've got to win something at the end of the night.
I think winning is you can go. You know what I mean? Like you actually get to leave this party is how you win.
Matt, you must do this. This is a great idea.
Carbon monoxide.
I love that idea.
Hop Frog is a terribly sad dwarf, a court jester, in the court of the king, an awful fat oily mean king, and that's where he's lived his whole life entertaining this king who loves jokes. But I get the feeling they're just terribly wrong, awful, wrong-headed jokes. He just hates the king and hates having to perform for the king and his counselors, and they're always playing tricks on him, and that's sort of his whole life is to be their Hop Frog. He's terribly sad, but he's sort of going ahead with his lot in life. One thing that makes the king and his whole pack of counselors roar with laughter is throwing a glass of wine in a girl's face. For example, there is another dwarf, Trippetta. She's like a serving maid. The king so loves his jollifications that he puts on this giant masquerade ball once a year. But the king and his counselors wait until the last minute to get their costumes together, and the way they decide to get their costumes together is they get Hop Frog drunk. And they make him create a story for them, and they'll go as the characters in the story. But it is also at this moment when they're getting him drunk that they throw the wine in Trippetta's face. And Hop Frog chooses to defend her honor and exact a terrible revenge. One of the first things I thought of in thinking of this story was the notion of an extended period of horrifying offstage screaming. I feel like if Hop Frog is an entertainer doing something horrible to his usual audience cause they demand something of him, something horrible should be done to this audience by these entertainers. But that's just how I pictured it so far. I have no idea if that's really what's going to happen.